The first thing I noticed was how loud the silence felt. Not the room itself, the silence. It pressed against everything, the walls, the bed, even my chest. I remember sitting at the edge of the mattress with my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying to keep them from shaking. The lamp beside the bed gave off a soft amber light, weak enough to leave half the room in shadow, and somehow that made everything feel more uncertain. I kept staring at the wooden floor because it felt easier than looking at him. Not because I was afraid of him, because I was afraid of the moment, afraid that everyone else understood something I didn't. And deep down, I already knew that was true. I didn't understand it then, but confusion becomes terrifying when you think you're the only person feeling it. That was the first moment I truly felt emotionally alone. Nobody warned me this night would feel this strange.
Nobody explained how awkward silence becomes when two young people are expected to suddenly understand adulthood overnight. Nobody explained the pressure of pretending to feel ready, when inside you feel completely lost, and because nobody explained it, I blamed myself immediately. I thought maybe maturity was supposed to arrive automatically, like marriage itself somehow changes you overnight. But sitting there in that quiet room, I still felt like the same confused girl I had been the week before. That realization sat heavily inside my chest. That's when something started to feel off. Not because of him, not because of the room, because I realized I had spent years learning rules, without learning emotional understanding. I knew how to behave correctly. I knew how to speak politely. I knew how to follow expectations. But emotionally, I had no idea what I was supposed to do. That's the part nobody explains. People teach behavior, but they rarely teach emotional readiness, and those are completely different things. He sat beside me carefully, slowly, and I noticed something immediately. He looked nervous too. That surprised me. I think part of me expected confidence from him, expected certainty, but instead, he looked just as unsure as I felt. And somehow, that made the silence even heavier, because suddenly, it wasn't just me pretending, it was both of us. Two young people sitting beside each other, trying to perform emotional understanding we didn't actually have. At the time, I told myself this was normal, that maybe everyone feels confused during moments like this, that maybe adulthood simply feels uncomfortable at first. But deep inside, something resisted that explanation. Because nervousness fades. This feeling stayed. This felt deeper, like emotional isolation hiding quietly beneath the surface of everything. We barely spoke, just small conversation, short answers, the kind people use when they don't know how to talk honestly about what they're actually feeling. And every time the conversation stopped, the silence returned immediately, stronger than before. I became aware of every tiny sound. The shifting blankets, the wind touching the windows, the quiet creaking of wood somewhere in the house. Even my own breathing sounded too loud. That's when I realized something painful. I was trying to disappear emotionally inside the room, trying not to say the wrong thing, trying not to reveal how confused I really felt, trying not to seem childish, because once you believe everyone else understands something except you stop trusting your own emotions. You become smaller, quieter, more careful. That's exactly what happened to me. Looking back now, I think that was the first night I truly understood how emotional silence shapes people, especially young people raised around unspoken expectations. Because silence doesn't remove confusion, it hides it, and hidden confusion slowly turns into shame. I didn't understand it then, but I had already started blaming myself for not emotionally understanding something nobody honestly explained. That's what stayed with me longest. Not the night itself. The shame. The feeling that I was somehow behind everyone else emotionally. The next morning made everything stranger, because everything looked completely normal again. Breakfast was prepared. People smiled. Conversation sounded calm and ordinary. Nobody asked how I felt. Nobody explained anything, and meanwhile, inside me, something still felt unsettled. That was the beginning of the split. The difference between appearance and reality, between what people show publicly and what they quietly carry emotionally. Days passed, then weeks, but the feeling stayed, quiet, persistent, like a question sitting somewhere in the back of my mind. And once a question stays long enough, it slowly changes the way you see everything around you. I started noticing things I ignored before, the way older women avoided certain conversations, the way uncomfortable topics disappeared quickly, the way silence filled spaces where honesty should have existed. That's when something started to feel off again, not just about marriage, about the entire culture surrounding emotional silence, because I slowly realized something painful. People weren't quiet because they fully understood. They were quiet because silence had been passed down to them too. That realization changed everything for me. One afternoon, I was helping another young woman hang clothes outside. Her name was Miriam. We weren't discussing anything serious, just weather, work, daily life. And then suddenly, very quietly, she asked me something. "Did you know what you were supposed to do your first night?" I looked at her immediately, and before I could answer, she laughed softly, not happily, nervously, because I didn't. That sentence stayed with me for years, because suddenly, everything made sense in a different way, not comforting, painful, because I realized this confusion wasn't personal weakness, it was pattern, something repeated quietly between many young women, something nobody explained honestly, but everyone silently carried. That realization followed me home that evening. I remember laying awake, staring into the darkness, thinking about how many people probably entered adulthood emotionally unprepared, while pretending confidence because everyone around them expected it. How many blamed themselves for confusion created by silence, night after night. Those thoughts stayed with me, and every morning, everything continued normally again. That was the hardest part, the normalness of it all, because when emotional confusion becomes ordinary, people stop questioning it. At the time, I told myself this was normal, but slowly, I stopped believing that, because healthy things usually become clearer with honesty. This never fully did, and that realization frightened me, not because I suddenly understood everything, but because I realized emotional preparation mattered far more than anyone admitted. Not rules, not appearances, real emotional understanding. That's what people truly needed. I didn't understand it then, but silence shapes people emotionally long before they recognize it happening. It teaches you which emotions should stay hidden, which questions feel dangerous, which discomforts are supposed to be carried quietly. And once you grow up inside that silence, you stop recognizing confusion as something deserving answers. You start treating it like personal weakness instead. That understanding took years. Years of slowly learning words I didn't have when I was younger. Pressure, expectation, emotional isolation, suppression. Things I had experienced deeply, without knowing how to describe them. And once you finally have words for something, you begin seeing your past differently. Looking back now, I don't think the hardest part was not knowing what I was supposed to do. I think the hardest part was believing I was the only one who felt lost, because loneliness becomes heavier when everyone pretends certainty. And maybe that's why honest conversations matter so much. Because confusion becomes less frightening the moment someone finally says, "I felt that too." If you're still listening, maybe part of this story feels familiar to you. Maybe you've experienced moments where everyone expected emotional understanding, without emotional guidance. If you have, you're not weak, and you're not alone. That's something I wish someone had told me years earlier. I still think about that night sometimes. Not because of what happened, but because of how deeply unprepared I felt while pretending everything was fine. Because of how badly I wanted someone to explain things honestly instead of expecting automatic understanding. Some things stay with you, not as clear memories, but as emotional weight your body remembers long before your mind fully understands it. And maybe that's the part nobody talks about, not the tradition itself, but the emotional silence surrounding it. The expectation that young people should automatically understand adulthood emotionally, without emotional guidance. If you grew up in a place where silence was treated like maturity, where difficult conversations disappeared quickly, where confusion had to stay hidden, I understand you, because I know what it feels like to realize too late, that nobody ever taught you how to emotionally understand the moment you were expected to survive. And maybe, speaking honestly about it now, is the first step toward finally breaking that silence. If this story connected with you, leave a comment below. Sometimes hearing "me too" changes everything. And if you want more honest stories people usually stay silent about, subscribe, because maybe these conversations matter more than we realize.